Hello, everyone. This is Scott, host of Ruminate This with Agrarian Solutions. We truly believe that any organization is only as great as the people within that organization. In this special Meet the Team series, I will sit down one-on-one with every team member and learn more about their passions, interests, and what drives them to strive for excellence every day. We hope you enjoy getting to know us. All right, hey, welcome everybody back to Ruminate This with Agrarian Solutions. I'm your host, Scott Zaire, and today we continue our Meet the Team episodes, special series we're doing to shed light on one of our core values, which is relational, the first letter in the word RISE, our acronym for our core values. And today I am pleased to be bringing in one Miss Morgan Ekovich to the podcast table, if you would. And relationships, we talk about them a lot, in the Meet the Team series. We've talked at length, Morgan, about how this industry, agriculture in general, I've spent my life in dairy, it's really small.
Mm-hmm.
And relationships are important. The old adage, you better not burn a bridge because you never know if you need to walk across it later in life. Well, that is amplified by like 100 in a small industry like agriculture, where everybody knows everybody. And I say that because this is how we met you.
Yeah, it is.
So, a quick, just a little bit quick of who Morgan is, how you came to be working with us here on the podcast at Agrarian Solutions. And then we'll dive into a little bit of the nuances of how we connected all those dots.
Yeah. So, kind of how I started working with Agrarian in a more, I don't want to say day to day, but more on a regular basis, is I helped them actually launch this podcast. So, we help set up the system so that you guys can get content on a weekly basis to make sure that you can get everything you need. And there's a lot of steps on the back end. So, I was working with a woman named Jamie Peth, who you'll hear from her in the upcoming months in her interview. And she had been working with Agrarian. I'd been working with Jamie. Long story short, Kelly Brisley is my mom, and I knew Scott before I realized Kelly and Scott knew each other. So there was I was working with Scott in a different area for one of his personal businesses, and it just kind of all trickled. But really, how I came to work with you guys was through the podcasting. Like before
Yeah.
that, I knew who you were. I knew what you guys did. I'd done some talks for you guys when it came to fitness and nutrition, because that's my own business. In addition to helping people launch podcasts, as I'm an online fitness and nutrition coach. So I was helping you guys, and it just kind of trickled into this different fun area where you get to kind of see all sorts of things.
Yeah, some of the stuff you just mentioned, I actually kind of forgot, for a brief moment. We had you on another training platform that we do, trying to bring value to those folks who are in sales. They're on the road a lot. Some of the listeners that we have on this platform with Ruminate This, I'm thinking of nutritionists and veterinaries and even dairy farmers that are in tractors a lot or in the dump truck or whatever. But that training that you did for us on the other platform, just little things that we could do throughout the day when you're driving 300-400 miles a day to try to keep up, somewhat good health, maybe healthier type snacks or exercises you could even do while you're sitting in your driver's seat, right? Just to keep the blood pumping. Yeah. So if you guys need more information on stuff like that, we can make connections for you. Yeah, it is kind of a neat circle. And I think back to 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. And I think you know a little bit of this story, but the first time I met your mom, Kelly Brisley, who is like my right hand person in my work life at this point in my career. I couldn't do any of this stuff without Kelly. But the mastermind behind this whole thing, Rob Hamaker, and it's really interesting. Talk about relationships. I knew Rob prior to this, but he invited Kelly, Jamie, myself, Jeff Hostetter, and Mark Carpenter to the Agrarian Sales Conference in Niagara Falls, Canada in 2018, 19, somewhere in there. None of us worked for Agrarian. We all worked for a
Oh.
different company that has a close working relationship with Agrarian. And now, fast forward, what, 5, 6 years? We're like, Mark is our general manager. Obviously, I'm full time. Your mom's involved. I mean, she's essentially full time. I can't believe the amount of work that your mom does for us. Jamie, the mastermind behind initially the other training platform and with you, and then now the podcast. Folks, like I said earlier, man, you can't go through life burning bridges. And the relationships you make today, sometimes you just have no idea, Morgan, where they're going to end up. The first time I met you, right? And through Jamie, and, we're doing this other training platform. Did you ever think we'd be doing a podcast together? And essentially,
No.
you are our team lead. Like you have taught us how to produce a podcast and get a podcast out. I just think that's so wild, the connections. And honestly, Morgan, like it comes back to RISE, right? It's relational,
Mhm.
strategic. I can't even spell RISE. Relational integrity, strategic, and excellence. And you have demonstrated that like full display from the minute we started working, talking about doing this podcast. So it's been a lot of fun to get to know you on that level and work with you. So one of the things I like to ask people in this Meet the Team series is describe in your mind the perfect team. What does it look like?
Ah.
How does it function? And what's the key to making it all successful?
So I've been very fortunate to be part of a multitude of teams. So, yes, I have an online fitness and nutrition company, but I also work with you guys. I also work with Jamie and her team, and they're all different dynamics. But one of my roles that is consistent is I'm essentially a project manager. Is I'm not necessarily the visionary of it, but I think every team needs a visionary. Someone who is that pinball in the pinball machine that is like boo, 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 doing all these things because we need somebody with those ideas.
Yeah.
Then you also need somebody such as myself who is, okay, those are amazing. Which one are we going to do? Let's create a plan. Let's make it all organized. Let's actually figure out how to bring this to execution. Because if you don't have that piece, those visionaries, they just keep producing ideas, but there's no execution.
Yeah.
And then I feel like you need the person who is then going to implement, who is going to not just implement the task, but be willing to learn something new to make that task move faster, to allow us to implement quicker.
Yep.
So I think those are the three main. And I think here on our team for podcasting at least, like I know you Agrarian as a team is much larger than the four of us that work really closely on a weekly basis to help produce this. We have that. Kelly and Amber are very similar. They have different roles, but they're both executioners. You're the visionary, and I'm over here making sure all the boxes get checked so we can move forward. Because if we're missing one of our roles, this podcast wouldn't happen. We would have all Scott's amazing ideas, or we'd have all these tasks getting done with no ideas to follow them, or I would be managing something that there's nothing being produced. Like all these roles are very important. I think part of every team, honestly. And I think it's important not that you just have these roles, but you mesh well with these people. Because
Yeah.
you may have a visionary and you just hate their visions. It's probably not the visionary for you to have on your team. Like you're doing yourself and the company a disservice. So I think that's also important is to have a role not just filled, but with the person that actually aligns with you guys.
That's a great point. And I think it takes a certain amount of humility as well, from each team member to foster that cohesive working unit too. And I see that within our podcast team. I see it within our sales team. I rate at every level, but sticking to what we're kind of speaking about, I know I am not the executioner. I'm not the tenacity guy. And I'm referencing like the 6 types of working genius kind of
Mhm.
thing. So like based on that assessment, mine is idea and wonder and galvanizing. Those are my main traits. So, yes, I can come up with the crazy idea and I can rally a group of people around that idea.
Mhm.
But to your point, I would never bring this home on my own. Not going to happen. I I'm going to lose focus on the fine details. And it's, but where I see the humility come in a lot is just in my own perspective, or I guess my own personal perspective of this podcast team that we have here at Agrarian. It can be really intimidating not knowing what you don't know. And it takes, as an entrepreneur, I have my own business as well. You feel like you have to know everything.
Hmm.
You have to figure it out and it's on you to figure it out. And I think sometimes that's one of the frustrations I have as an entrepreneur is that I'm actually forced to do the things that I hate doing. I have to fill out the paperwork. I have to get it turned into the state. I have to cross the T's, dot the I's, that kind of thing. So then when I started working with you and Kelly and Amber, it's like I wanted to be the one that was like involved with all those little things. And it didn't take a lot out of me, but it took me realizing that a little bit of humility right here will go a long way. And I'm glad that I reached that point with you and Amber and Kelly. And it was all at different points, but I reached that point at a time where we didn't hinder the team. And so for me, that was a proud moment for myself personally. But like from your perspective, how did you see this team all coming together? Because I do think right now we do have a very cohesive team, especially on the podcast side.
So I think I had a different perspective coming in because so I had been working with Amber with Jamie and her business, and I believe we launched in March last year. Is that correct?
Yeah, April, March, somewhere in there. Yep.
Okay. So during that time, I'd been working with Amber and Jamie, just us three on her team for at least a year at that point. So
Oh
I
wow.
already knew what Amber was capable of. I knew what we could hand over to her and that she would get it done. And I didn't need to micromanage her process. We need to had some communication so we were all on the same page of like, are you going to check in with me when something's complete or am I checking in with you? Like, you just had to feel that out. So I already had that relationship with her. You and I had already worked together, not on a regular basis, but we'd already worked together about all in calls, about just like little side stuff, because we also took a personal development course together. Like, we had a relationship already built there. And then with my mom, I grew
Yeah.
up with her. I worked for Central Star I did some temp work in the summer. Like, so
Yep.
I'd already had a working relationship as well with her. And I knew what she was good at. I knew where her stressors were for her and for you. And I kind of was able to come into this team knowing that all these pieces were going to fit. It was just about us finding our battle rhythm, essentially,
Yeah.
to the system.
True.
So I think my perspective was different because I already had three different opportunities to work with you guys before we came together. We're like, we're going to do this as a team now because this is how we are spearheading this project.
Yep. So you may not see it from this perspective, and we're kind of switching gears here a little bit, but so your personal business, nutrition and fitness coach, Get Fit with Morgan, right? Or Get Fit with Me with Morgan
Get fit
Ekovich.
with me.
Yes.
It's
And
my shows.
yes, Morgan Ekovich. Yep. But you've been around agriculture your whole life in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And as a nutrition fitness coach, you are still involved very much with agriculture. Food is agriculture, right? So, with that perspective on, what to you is so special about the agriculture industry?
Yeah, my mom grew up as a dairy farmer. My dad grew up as a dairy farmer. So I had it in my background. I grew up with horses, so I didn't actually like have cows growing up, but we had horses. We had chickens. I don't remember having chickens, but I remember having a chicken coop. I had to ask my mom about that recently. Of did I make up that part of my child? I don't ever remember having eggs, which was my concern. That like we had a chicken coop, but never I remember having eggs.
Just had a lot
So
of
like
roosters.
I don't know. So there was a point in my life where I really didn't think that that area of like my family's generations was ever going to kind of follow me because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But then when I got into doing what I was doing and talking about food, talking about exercise, and starting to really understand some of the challenges we're facing in agriculture when it comes to generations and families not wanting to continue farms and some of the struggles that are coming up with the environment and all of the things, the more I'm in it, the more it is important because it's all about putting in whole foods into our body and our system matters. And over the years, that system gets smaller and smaller because less people are doing it. So for me, it's been really impactful to actually kind of have my hands in the agricultural side because I feel like I can talk to my clients of like, hey, so the benefits of this is one, there's no additives because it's whole, but also you have a better idea of where it's coming from. You know this. Okay, difference between organic and non-organic. Like I have a better understanding of all of that just because I kind of know the ins and outs of how cattle are being taken care of. Not at every farm, but that generalization where I think a lot of people don't get that insight because they just see whatever's on social media and they take it and everybody's an influencer.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
it's been really beneficial to have an idea of wow, small farms, if you have one in your local community and you can afford it, buy from that small farm. How can we make the farmers markets in the summer last longer for us? Like even just those small things like that, because our bodies respond better to it than it does the ultra processed, trans fat, saturated fats, things like that.
Yeah. And, I think COVID did wake a lot of people up to that idea. I mean, just like locally in my area, we saw almost an explosion of people seeking out local sources for beef, lamb, pork, and poultry too, to the point where like I have a friend of mine that's his business. He does beef, lamb, pork, poultry, and like he can't keep up. But it's really scary when you think about it. I mean, that was the first time in my life that I saw, reports of empty grocery store shelves in the US. And then you start looking into it and I mean, like 15, 20 years ago, not even that long, like 10 years ago, this is why we need a fact checker to check my facts. But it was pretty recently though but at that point there was anywhere from 6 to 8 months food supply in the system in the US. So it's like
Mm.
the idea of us running out of food is ludicrous. Like we got a buffer. You go back to 2020 during COVID when we started seeing empty shelves and that kind of stuff. At that point in time, that snapshot, there was 30-day supply of food in our country in the pipeline.
That's crazy.
And yeah, that woke some people up like, hey, you know what? I never thought the idea of putting a freezer in my basement or somewhere in my house was a great idea, but if I can go buy a side of beef and know that I have 400 pounds of meat sitting in here, that protein is pretty cheap. It doesn't matter what you pay for it.
Right. And I think the new trend that I'm seeing people, even in my clients, is the homesteading, which
Yeah.
homesteading looks different to everybody. You've got the full like live off the grid, you've got 3 years worth of everything. And then you have somebody like me who I'm buying a deer this year. We're eventually I bought a deep freeze for the first time in my life because I was like, I can also taste a difference in meat. So like
Oh, yeah.
I want the meat from the butcher. I don't want the I love Aldi, but I don't want the Aldi ground beef. Like I want
Yeah.
the better tasting. And it's also like I'm going to learn how to make my own tortilla shells. It does take more time and energy, but there is this other level of I think we're just starting to get more conscious and more aware of what we're putting in our body. And eventually we're going to get down that rabbit hole, or people probably are, of, well, what are they putting in the cows? Which comes back to you guys of what types of vitamins, supplements, all that things are the cattle taking, because that eventually all comes back to us. So making sure that they're also having high quality things in them because it's a cycle.
That's one of the coolest things I think that we don't talk enough about at Agrarian is our business is probiotics. We're a probiotic company, and it doesn't get any more natural than good
Mm-mm.
bacteria. to help keep cattle healthy. Yeah, so I just think that's something neat that over the course of time, and we could get into a really long conversation about how warped our food supply became in the country as we'll push that aside a little bit. But in the 20,
Conversation for another day.
yeah, in the 25-year history of Agrarian, a little more than 25, like we've been a probiotic company and we were a probiotic company when probiotics weren't cool. And and now all of a sudden we're becoming the cool kids on the side of the road again because we're a probiotic company. I think that's pretty neat. So a question I would have though is, from I don't get to ask this question very often in these things, but your perspective, you work with clients in your own business that likely have no ties to agriculture whatsoever,
Mm.
like the true consumer, right, in the marketplace. What is their perception of agriculture in the US? What things are they concerned about that dairy farmers and beef ranchers and other producers can take home and try to apply?
Yeah. So, first thing that I think has gotten, and I'm going to kind of go on trends because I think this is something that I don't care who you work with. If you have a social media account, you've seen something like this. And these are honestly like two of the most important is you've got the people out there who believe dairy is bad for you, which I have very strong opinions on. So one of the things I believe in dairy. I love dairy products. I speak at PDPW's business conference. I'm going to speak again here in March. And last year they had a whole charcuterie. Like they are known for cheese and milk and that. And one of the things is, yes, it doesn't sit well with everybody, but sometimes it actually goes back to your gut health. It's not necessarily that your body can't tolerate it. It's because your body can't tolerate it because of all the other crap you've put in your body. So that is something to look at. Like there are ways to double check and see, are you really lactose intolerant? Because if we think about it, back in the day, were our grandparents or great grandparents ever lactose intolerant? Like
No,
that, I don't think
no,
that
we
was a
didn't.
term we used.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
So, one of the biggest things is continuing to promote dairy in any way possible because I do remember in 2020 when people weren't buying milk and they were having to dump milk because it wasn't being sold how it was supposed to. And that is money. That is money that is essentially being dumped. So the more we can promote those recipes, I know cottage cheese recipes are a huge trend right now. I love yogurt and I love different ways that you can do yogurt, different ways you can do breads with yogurt and cottage cheese. Like any
Hmm.
way you can promote dairy, the better because you've got good proteins, you've got vitamins and minerals, and there's nothing else in the ingredients but the way that it's processed. So that is one of the things that I can say is like if you know that you need like milk is a big or dairy in general is big for you and your business or your clients, help them like promote it. Help them sell to people because there's so much going against us right now. And it's bad for you. Don't have it. It's bad for this. Like there's ways to decide that.
Morgan, you bring up a good point because every dairy farmer, every beef rancher has the opportunity to tell their story.
Hmm.
And okay, full circle, relationships. Build a relationship with the consumer. And it doesn't always have to be a relationship like from a farmer's market where you got to talk one-on-one with somebody and their kids, their whatever, whatever. We'll use the example of over time, especially as I get older, not that I'm old, you become more conscious of what you're putting into your body, what you're putting on your body, deodorant. Like
Hmm.
I about a year and a half ago was like looking at the ingredients and I'm like, yeah, this looks like a bad idea to put on your glands in your armpit, right? And so sought out a more all natural alternative. And the only reason I picked the brand that I did was because their marketing messaging spoke to me. And I felt like I developed a relationship with their brand, their messaging. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And
Hmm.
they got me. And I'll probably be a customer for a long, long time. You know? So yeah, I like that. Like it really does come back to that, make it personal.
It doesn't, and I don't think it has to be complicated. I think we get caught in building a relationship online has to look a certain way. Like, no, it can literally mean like send out an email to your people using your Gmail account. BCC everybody on it. Like it can be the most
Yeah.
basic thing of like, hey, really appreciated if, for instance, if you've got a farmer's market, collect people's emails throughout the year. At the end of the year, send them out an email that says, thank you so much. You're receiving this email because you've purchased something from us over this last year. It's meant so much to us. We wanted to tell you a little bit about our story
Yeah.
because our background and where we come from and how we got to where we are matters. And that's what people connect with. People connect with people. And the more we can be people to other people, the better we're going to be.
Okay, I was actually gonna not try to say it in this episode, but you're gonna tease it out of me. Again, show me a business that's ever done business with another business. I will show you the amazing men and women behind the scenes that make it happen. It's people to people, and that's really what this series, Meet the Team, is really all about. It's bringing that to light. And you're right, it doesn't have to be complicated. Complications in any relationship lead to demise.
Mhm.
And, the simpler, the clearer the message, the communication, the better off you are, for sure. Yeah,
And
that's funny.
and to circle back to your initial question. So I said dairy, that's something that I think people are pushing out of their diets, which I really don't think is necessary. Get some tests done, figure out what's actually going on internally. The other thing that I see people doing an influx of, though, is meat because everybody's focused on their protein goal. Dairy is a great source of protein, but also if you sell any sort of meat, like
Yeah,
there's a huge market for you right now.
yeah.
Like tell your story, get in conversation with people, show up, ask, like answer people's questions, give people answers to things that they're too afraid to ask. Because like if you can create that relationship with them, they're going to buy from you. Of like, hey, that was Sally out there just 3 weeks ago. This is now Sally in a package. Like whatever it is, like build that relationship with them
Yeah.
that like, yeah, no, we do all of this ourselves or we trust these people because we want you to have the best possible and show that.
For my own business, we're maple syrup, and I haven't like officially put this out as like a tagline or anything, but when I'm talking to people one on one, they'll ask me like, "Well, what does your maple syrup taste like?" And so you try to describe the flavor, and but it really what I like to tell people is I have a 5-year-old daughter. If she says it's good, I'm good with that. Like that's, don't be afraid to make it personal. Like it's okay,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I'm glad we got into that. It's maybe a little bit off the meet the team topic, but I think that's a good message for people to think about as they listen to this. And one of the things I like to ask too, Morgan, and I'm curious to hear your answers on this, mentors. So you can mention names, you don't have to, but speak from your perspective the importance of even seeking out mentorship from somebody. And then, who are some mentors that you have had throughout your life, personally, professionally, either way you want to go with it, and the impact that they've had on you?
Yeah. So I don't think I've actually sought out a mentor. I don't think I've actually like gone out trying to look for somebody to fill that role. It just kind of happened. For instance, I would consider Jamie one of my mentors. Long story short, COVID happened. I was laid off from my job, went to start an online business, started going live on Facebook. My mom goes, go check out Jamie. Found Jamie on LinkedIn, sent her a message. Jamie and my mom knew each other. The rest is history. I now work for Jamie and like we've got all these different dynamics. And she has always been a few steps ahead of me in business, which has been great to see her kind of try these processes. Okay, great. Now let me see if I can try it. Okay. And we work very well together. She's that visionary and I'm the implementation. So we're a good yin and yang. So I would definitely say that in the business sense, she has definitely been one of my mentors. The other two that I would say have been very unexpected mentors would be my nanny family. So I still nanny once a week and He was my professor up at school and he lived near my hometown. I went up to him and said, "Hey, don't know if any of your kids' friends are looking for a nanny for the summer, but I'm home. I'm looking for a nanny job." He goes, "I think we need a nanny. Call my wife." So called her, ended up getting set up with them, and they are massive believers in personal development. And I didn't realize it in 2018, in 2018, end of 2018, 2019, how important personal development was. I had all this stigma behind it of all the computer for dummies, like all that type of stigma behind it, I had for no reason at all, other than it just wasn't something prevalent in my mind. But since then, they got me introduced to the Landmark Forum, which was super amazing for personal and professional development. And then getting to work alongside of them, they're both entrepreneurs. They both have their hands in three to four things all at once. The values they teach their kids, the way we have conversations that without even knowing that a family that I thought I was just going to be a nanny for, that both of them would turn into great friends and mentors was just very natural. And when I've got those problems coming up of like in all areas of life, hey, can I have your input on this? Where would you recommend me go? What should I think about? So those would be the two in my later life that I think have stuck around and just kind of happened without any force per se.
I think that's, and I'm glad you responded to the question the way you did, because that's kind of the point, right? People, we tend to think, okay, if we can't talk to anybody or nobody wants to talk to us anyway. And, maybe you do have this mindset that you have to like, you know, try to go find somebody or whatever. And it's like if you're looking for a relationship, I can remember back when I was, before I met my wife, I'd gotten out of a relationship and it's like, oh, I need to find somebody. I need to find somebody. And then it's like you come to the realization that, you know what, if you just stop looking and voila, appear summer. And I think the main thing, Morgan, is just being open to the idea that somebody cares about you. Somebody is going to want to invest. Yeah, I mean, the impact, obviously, what you just described, that's huge for you. I did not know that Kelly was the actual mastermind behind introducing you and Jamie. That is pretty funny. That's pretty
Yeah,
funny.
she said go check out Jamie's YouTube. Jamie has now shown that YouTube video as like, this is where you can start. This is how far you can come.
I know I had a friend of mine and of course, he says it because he's a friend, but he listens to the podcast. And I was actually just with him a couple nights ago and we were visiting and he's like, I really enjoy like listening to the podcast. And he's in agriculture. He's a full-time employee for the US Mail, but he has
Mhm.
beef cattle and he does some hay and stuff like that. And I think he even said like, you do a good job on the podcast, right? And that means a lot to me. I hope people think I do a good job. That'd be great. But if you go back and watch, the other training platform that we do, and I've watched that video from like 4 years ago, the first time that I was on, on the Zoom screen, and like it's embarrassing. Oh, but
We
yeah,
all have to
and
start somewhere.
we do. And I think, I'm reminded of a quote. Steve Gilliland is an author that I followed. He's a speaker and he does some stand-up stuff too. But there's a book that I read from him that I was probably in that same stage where it's like, personal development. I always think of like the self-help books, and I don't need any help anyway.
Mhm.
But there's a book that he has called Making a Difference, a Matter of Purpose, Passion, and Pride. And within that book, there's a quote that really stuck with me. And he says, he frames it up, taking action, right? The first step to making a difference is actually doing something. And he said, like my mother always said, taking the first step puts you halfway there.
Mm.
Because most people won't take the first step. I think it's important for people to realize that, like, your mom made the connection between you and Jamie, but you actually had to take action,
Hmm.
put yourself out there a little bit.
And
And
what and I think what's funny is we get introduced to people all the time. We get business cards all the time. How often do we reach out to all these people? And do we reach out to everybody? Like, just in general with relationships is one, it's making sure you're having the relationship with the right people, I think is a big thing because you get business cards and you're like, nice meeting them. I don't need to contact them again. Like, I don't see how this would fit long term.
yeah,
But then you remember just because they may not be who you need, they may know the person you need. So a relationship is always going to be beneficial somewhere down the line, but it's taking that first step, like you said, to I'm going to sit down, I'm going to thank them all for meeting them at this conference,
yep.
or I'm going to thank them, whatever that looks like, because most of the time, if we sit here and we wait for mail to come, if we wait for somebody to write us a letter, it's not going to happen. We have to send the letter first for them to respond and send us one back.
I'm going to do a callback to our very first episode with Mark Carpenter. And we were talking about the relational aspect of it. And he made a comment, like his daughter, like she had asked him, and it was like, hey, Dad, what's the secret to being successful? Or, something along those lines. And, what you were just talking about was like, hey, send a little note. Say, hey, nice to meet you. To me, that's being a nice person. And at the end of the
Hmm.
day, like people, there's a stereotype out there that the nice people finish last. And I'm here to tell you it's not true. It's not true. Like and it's not that hard to be a good human being.
Mm-mm.
Like it's really not. I'm reminded of a quote, and it's one of those little corny things you put on your Facebook profile when you're in your younger years. And I think it's actually still on mine, but I don't remember where I heard it, but it says, if you are open to everyone, you have the opportunity to be inspired by anyone.
Mm.
And yeah, that business card thing, that kind of brings realization into it because I'm sure there's some people that I got cards from that I haven't reached out to. So now, thanks. You made me feel bad. Now I got to go do some stuff.
I have mine organized because I always if I meet somebody, I do the ones that I think are going to be the most beneficial relationship first, medium, and then the people last. And I don't always get to them, but they're there. So that if I ever run out of things to do, that's kind of where I circle back to. It may
Yeah.
be a year, like, hey, met you here at this time. Bet you don't remember me, but just wanted to say thanks for that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Well, hey, we are almost out of time, but we haven't really talked about what you like to do for fun.
Mm. I like to travel. Traveling is one of my favorite. I love being on an airplane.
What's the coolest place you've ever been?
Oh, probably recently has been Barcelona. Last February, my sister and I took a trip to Barcelona. We stayed in Madrid for a night or two and then spent a few days in Barcelona and it was awesome. We walked everywhere. The food was delicious. I will say eventually you get tired of that meat that I forget what it is. I think it's ham, some sort of cured ham. You eventually get tired after 7 days of eating it at every meal. You get to the end and you're kind of wishing for a vegetable, but it is totally amazing and worth it. So Barcelona is probably the most cool place I've been, but I've also took a cruise a few years ago down Bahamas, Cayman Islands, things like that. So that was really cool to kind of see something and do some of that adventuring that I haven't gotten to do. I've only done like all inclusives before.
The cruises, we did a cruise for our honeymoon. We went to Ocho Rios, Jamaica, Grand Cayman Island, Labadee, Haiti, and the Mayan ruins in Mexico.
Ooh.
And yeah, like I would do a cruise tomorrow. We had a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I love traveling. I also just love being outside. We've got a little patio area at our house where I'll hang my hammock and come springtime when things seem to be a little less busy in the spring because once summer hits, I feel like the schedule fills up. So in the
Yeah.
spring, I get to sit out there quite a bit and work, which I really enjoy. My newest hobby that I love doing is I took pottery in high school, like pottery where you throw pottery on a wheel and you make bowls. I realized my mom and my sister didn't do that. My sister didn't take like every craft class in high school like I did. I didn't like real school. So I took every gym class, every woodworking class, every class other than the mandatory ones that I was supposed
Yeah.
to take if I could. So I took a pottery class in high school and I made bowls. They were all bowls and I painted them all the same color. So they look uniform. They are not all the same size. I can guarantee that. But over Christmas break, my sister came into town from New York and I scheduled a pottery class for my sister, mom, and I. And there's this place locally, and we all were successful in making bowls. And I just kind of jumped into it as if like it hadn't been 11 years since I had made it. So
Yeah.
that was really fun to it's fun to like get your mind off and do something creative. So I'd say pottery is my new hobby for the year that I'm going to take a 7-week course on it in person. I want to make plates. I want to get rid of my hand-me-down plates and I want to make plates for my house.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was terrible at pottery in high school. Yeah. I could make a good snake. That's about it.
So a handle to a mug. If somebody else had to make your mug, you made the handle.
Yeah, I didn't inherit the crafty gene when it comes to stuff like that. I can draw stick figures and I can make snakes out of clay. That's about it. Morgan, I appreciate you taking time out of your day today to join us on Ruminate This. And thank you for being because you're like the North Star for us on this podcast thing. Like we didn't know what we were doing. We talked about at one point, I'm going to say in 2020, early in 2023, like, hey, wouldn't it be cool to do a podcast and talk about this, which is kind of what our regular episodes are. And then there it sat on the shelf and it got brought up again towards the end of 2023 and voila, here you were. And so you've really provided a lot of leadership that was much needed and teaching us how to do this. So definitely want to say thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You guys are an awesome team to work with. Like, it's super fun to watch you get inspired by an episode, find the person that's going to be great for it, and make the episode. And then it's also fun to like watch all the intricate parts and watch everybody kind of give up control on what isn't theirs. So I've really enjoyed working with you guys, and I can't wait for what we have for 2025 because it's already here, but we've got some fun stuff coming up this year on the podcast. So it'll be fun to kind of see how it all unfolds.
I think so. And lastly, Morgan, I have followed you on Facebook, Get Fit with Me, and Instagram, I think. And so with your nutrition and fitness business, like you put out some really good content that has helped me. So
Oh,
thank you for
thanks.
that. So if people want to follow Morgan Ekovich on social to get nutrition and fitness advice, where can they go?
Yeah, so I will give you all these links so you can put them in the show notes. But for women, I have a Facebook group. So I'll give you the link to that. It's a free Facebook group. My Facebook page is Get Fit with Me. So me is just ME capital. And then my Instagram is at Morgan Ekovich. So you should be able to find me on there. You may stumble upon my personal profiles as well. It all interchanges and flip flops over each other. So if you find one of them, you'll find the rest. I do have a website, so I'll leave that below, but it's really long and lengthy. One thing,
That's
if
all
you are
right.
starting a business and you are listening, keep your website concise as well as your email. It's really hard later in life to switch it.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, you will find all of Morgan's links in the show notes. So yeah, check it out. Oh, go ahead.
And it is a podcast specifically for women, but I've had many men reach out to me and say it was very beneficial. I have Empower Her, all one word, wellness podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts. So I actually launched mine alongside of you guys. So it's been fun to kind of learn that together. So if you like the podcast style instead of the content scrolling style, go check that out as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, Morgan, for jumping in the Ruminate This podcast with us, Meet the Team series. And yeah, I look forward to continued working together as we keep putting these things together every week for our listeners. So
Awesome. Well,
All
thank you
right.
so much again for having me on.
All right. Thank you, Morgan. Have a great day.
You too.
If you found value in today's podcast, please hit subscribe and share. And we look forward to talking to you again next week.